Brachos, Daf Zayin for Yud Gimel. On Daf Zayin, the Gemara talks about Bilam's power. The Gemara explains that Bilam's power to curse people, to curse the Jews, came from his ability to figure out the exact moment that Hashem is angry, Kel Zoim B'Kol Yom, and he would curse at that moment and thereby inflict harm upon the target of his curse. The Gemara clearly implies that Bilam had actual power to harm via his curse. Many Rishonim, notably Ibn Ezra, disagree. They say Bilam was a fraud. He had no power at all. This is relevant to a Machlokes Rishonim disagreement about why the Torah prohibits cursing. Jews are prohibited from cursing other people. Cheresh, lo sikal cheresh, nasi ba'am chalosar. Why? So some Rishonim understand that curses have actual power. But other Rishonim, notably Rambam, say they don't. Curses have no power, so why are we prohibited to curse? So Rambam explains that we might have thought it's because it makes the person feel bad. If you curse him, he feels hurt, he feels worried. Rambam says, but it says you can't curse a cheresh, you can't curse someone who's deaf, he doesn't even hear you. So Rambam explains it's because you're indulging your baser, your vulgar, antisocial instincts, your antisocial impulses. That's wrong. A person should not do that. A person should control himself and not get so upset. Yonasan Eibshitz, who was a Makubal and did believe in the supernatural as a common thing, nevertheless, he also insists vehemently, kill eschinam lo tavo, as the Gemara in Makkah says, it can't be curses have power, and very similar to Rambam, he says the same thing, that the problem with cursing is that you're giving in, you're indulging your vile impulses, and that's something that you shouldn't be doing. On Daf Zayin and Beis, the Gemara talks about the idea of being misgara b'risham, the idea of provoking, antagonizing, getting into arguments and quarrels with risham, with sinners. The Gemara first says, mutter l'hisgaras b'risham, you're allowed to. It says, ozvei Torah yahal l'resha, those who have abandoned the Torah will praise risham, but v'shamrei Torah yisgaruvam, those who keep the Torah will provoke them, will antagonize them. The Gemara brings a contradiction. The Gemara says that elsewhere it says, al tisgarabo, if you see a rasha, shasham misachekislo, you see that fortune is smiling on him, you should not provoke him. The Gemara gives three distinctions. The Gemara says, mila didei, mila dishmaya, your own personal affairs, don't quarrel with him, but mila dishmaya, a religious issue, then you may. Ibayasema, another approach, if it's misachekis lo, you shouldn't. If his fortune is smiling on him, you should not start up with him. Rasha she'ena sham misachekis lo, you can. Third approach is that was the third approach. So we have mila didei, mila dishmaya, we have Rasha Shasham Misachekis Lo, Rasha She'ena Sham Misachekis Lo, V'Vayasema, they're both Rasha Shasham Misachekis Lo, but Tzadik Gomer can provoke, and a Tzadik She'ena Gomer cannot provoke. Marsha notes that it says Mutter L'Hisgaros, it's permitted, it doesn't say Mechuyev, Milu D'Shmaya, if it's a religious issue, maybe you have an obligation to reprove, to correct. The Gemara does not say that, the Gemara says Mutter. So the Marsha says, we're dealing with danger, if you antagonize the Rasha, it's a sakana, he may injure or kill you. So even if it's a mitzvah, he says, and even if you should, but we saw earlier in the Masechta, there's a possibility of Shema Yigram Hachet, that even a tzaddik who was promised good, like Yaakov, can worry that maybe he's done ill and Hashem will punish him. So a person can say, I don't want to start up with the Rasha, maybe I've done Chatoim and Hashem will not support me in my quarrel with the Rasha. Certainly, according to the last approach of the Gemara, that only Tzaddik Gomer can, certainly a person should not assume he's a Tzaddik Gomer and shouldn't start up with Rishon. Shlomo Kluger has an interesting tshuva. He was asked Halach L'Maisa about someone who wanted to know if he should engage in a quarrel with Rishayim. Sounds like there was some kind of anti-religious faction that was hostile to the Orthodox. Shlomo Kluger goes through the sugya. He says, how should we paskin these three terutzim? He says, which is normative halacha. On the one hand, Lishna Bastra, we sometimes follow the later opinion. On the other hand, it's a sakana. He says, suffix sakana. The rule is when there's a question of doubt about sakana, we have to be careful, we have to be stringent. He goes back and forth. Halacha l'maisa, he says, the bottom line is that we should not start up with Rishayim, the Rasham Misachekis Lahem. Even, he says, if there's an individual who's not a particularly successful and Sham Misachekis Lo individual, if he's part of a faction, if he's part of a movement that's having its day in the sun, that fortune is smiling on that movement, that's included in Sham Misachekis Lahem. You should not antagonize them. And that's what he does. He says discretion is the better part of valor. He does not start up with the Rishayim. Daf Ches, the Gemara talks about the idea of tefillah b'tzibur. The Gemara says even if someone cannot daven b'tzibur, it actually starts on the bottom of Daf Zayin. Even if someone cannot daven b'tzibur, there's still an advantage to davening b'shah shatzibur mispalo. The way the Shulchan Aruch brings the halacha is a person is onus, for some reason he cannot go to shul. The next best thing is to daven at the same time the tzibur is mispalo. People live in places where they have no minyan, and isolated villages, the best thing to do is to daven when the tzibur is mispalim. Mishnah Berurah notes, also based on the Gemara, that if a person could get a minyan in his house, he should do that too. If you can't, if it's too much tercha, then the next best thing to do is to at least daven at the same time the tzibur does. What about davening musaf at a time the tzibur is davening shachris? So the Mishnah Berurah the Achronim bring from the Tzlach, B'cheskel Landau, that if you daven musaf at home at the same time as the tzibur is davening shachris, that does not have the advantage of tefillah b'tzibur. However, if you daven in shul musaf at the same time the tzibur is davening shachris, that is considered tefillas hatzibur. But the Achronim explain it's not really tefillah b'tzibur. It's the equivalent of b'shah shatzibur mispal. If you're not davening the same tefillah, it's not the real tefillah b'tzibur, but it's that other madrega, it's the other level of b'shah shatzibur mispal. The Tzlach also adds that this general advantage of davening at a time the tzibur is davening applies even if the tzibur is not actually saying Shemona Esrei. They're engaged in shiros b'tishbachos, praises of Hashem, like Ashrei u'Valotzion. So even then, if you come while they're davening Ashrei u'Valotzion, and you daven with them, you still have the advantage in the basic Knesset. You daven while they're davening Ashrei u'Valotzion, you still have the advantage of tefillah b'shah shat tzibur mispal. The Gemara goes on. The Gemara talks about the advantage of davening in a place of Torah. The Gemara says, "Oev Hashem Shaarei Tzion Mikol Mishkanos Yaakov." Hashem loves Sha'arim Mitzuyanim B'Halacha, which is the Beis Medrash is better than a basic Knesset. Hashem has Dal Amashal Halacha. That's his place in the world after the Churban. The Gemara brings that Abaye said he used to daven in his home, and he used to learn in his home and pray in the synagogue in Beit Knishtah. When he heard this thing about the advantage of the Beis Medrash, at that point he would daven where he learns. And other Amoraim, they had many shuls, and still they daven Bein Hamudi where they learn. The Rambam says the point of this Gemara is Beis Medrash is Gadol Beis Knesset, it's greater. Shulchan Aruch's language is Beis Medrash Kavua is Kadosh Yoser, it's holier. Mishnah Berurah brings from the Achronim that even if the Beis Knesset has Rov Am, it's a larger minyan, still Beis Midrash is better, even if it's a smaller minyan. However, that's for a different reason. That's not just because it's holier, that's because a person is learning and he has to take the time and to go to shul and he'll waste time. Then we say daven at a Beis Midrash. However, if it's otherwise, if it's not a question of Bittul Torah, you're not learning there, then a Rov Am is an advantage. However, the Mishnah Berurah says that we say that a shul with Rov Am is better than a Beis Midrash in a case where there's no Bittul Torah, that's only when it's a private Beis Midrash, but a Beis Midrash which is public, Kavua Rabbim, Yeshiva, certainly one where people are learning all day, that has an advantage over a shul, even if the shul has a larger minyan. The advantage of Beinei Amudi, of Sha'arim Mitzuyanim B'Halacha, the Shaarei Tzion, is better than Rov Am, and a person should daven in a yeshiva. It doesn't say anything about your yeshiva, it just says a person should daven in a place of Torah, certainly, at least a Beis Medrash Kavua Rabbim, even if the shul has the advantage of Rov Am Hadras Melech. Gemara talks about the advantage of someone who is nene miyagias kapo, someone who sustains himself by his own work, that it's even better than a Yarei Shemayim, the Gemara says. There's an important tshuva of the Me'il Tzedakah, of Yonah Landsofer. He deals with making Aliyah, and he discusses various arguments for or against doing this for the people in question, the families in question who wanted to go. So in terms of danger, he thinks it's safe enough, you should go, it's great, he says, it's a great mitzvah. However, the one thing that gives him pause, he says, is if a person won't be able to earn a living in Eretz Yisrael, and Chazal say, and he'll have to rely on tzedakah, and Chazal say, Gadol hanenemi gias kappa, it's such a great thing to support yourself, that's one reason he's not sure. He says he's not sure about this, but that's one very serious reservation he has about making aliyah, if a person will have to give up the advantage of Gadol hanenemi gias kappa. The Gemara brings that it's a terrible thing to leave shul while the Sefer Torah is being read. It says, "V'ozvei Hashem yichlu," those who abandon Hashem will be destroyed. That's if someone leaves when the Sefer Torah is being read. And Gavra L'Gavra, the Gemara says, Ravo used to leave. In general, sometimes leave. In general, the issur of leaving while they're reading the Torah is even if there's still a minyan, even if you already heard Kriyas Torah, it's just a bizayon for the Sefer Torah, so you can't leave. Ben Gavra L'Gavra, the Mishnah Berurah explains, even then, when there is some permission to leave Ben Gavra L'Gavra, that's only if there's still a minyan, if you're not going to break the minyan. That's also only if you already heard Kriyas Torah, because otherwise you're going to miss Kriyas Torah, or if you're going to come back right away before the next Aliyah. And even then, even if there's still a minyan, and you already heard Kriyas Torah, and it's Ben Gavra L'Gavra, after all that, still, it's only mutter, as Mishnah Berurah says, if there is a tzarech god. The Gemara says Rav Sheshes would turn aside during Kriyas Torah and would learn. The Rishonim ask that in Sota it says you're not allowed to talk during Kriyas Torah, even Dvar Halacha, even learning you're not allowed to do. So are you allowed to learn during Kriyas Torah or not? The Rishonim give a number of distinctions, a number of resolutions to this question. Tosfos says that in principle you could learn. That's what Rav Sheshes did. The Gemara in Sota that says you should not learn means you should not learn b'kol ram out loud, where you will interfere with the ability of the Balkari to read and be heard. But quietly, it's not a problem. Some say that even quietly, even though Tosfos is mutter quietly, that's only the Mishnah Berurah suggests that if you already heard Kriyas Torah. Otherwise, that part of ask just because you want to learn. If you didn't hear Kriyas Torah, how can you give up Kriyas Torah? So at least if you already heard Kriyas Torah, Tosfos says you can learn, provided it's quietly and you don't disturb other people. The Bahag says that the Isser to talk in Sota is only if there aren't going to be a minion. If there isn't a minion without you, but if there is a minion that's listening, then you can learn Torah. And the Rif says it was special for Rav Sheshes, who was Taraso Amnaso. That's a special level of commitment and single-mindedness about Torah. Then you can learn, but an ordinary person should not learn. Later posts can debate exactly what the halach is and what we do halach l'maisa about this debate. The Gemara brings the idea that we call being Mavra Sedra, what the Gemara calls Yashlam Adam Parshiyosef and Matibur. A person should recite to himself the parsha of each week, Shnaya Mikra v'Echad Targum, twice Mikra, the text, and once Targum. Tosfos discusses whether Targum, specifically the Onkelos that we have, or any Targum, any translation, English translation, is okay. Tosfos says Yesh Mefarshim, that any language is fine as long as you have translate the Torah from Hebrew into some other language. Tosfos himself disagrees. He says the Targum is more than a translation. The Talmud adds sometimes, not constantly, but the Talmud adds sometimes to the meaning of the text, and you're not going to get that in another simple translation. So you need the Targum specifically. When do you begin Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum? Until when do you have to, what's the deadline? When does it have to be done by? Tosfos says, there are different opinions, but Tosfos says that from when they begin reading the coming week's Parsha, which is Mincha of Shabbos the week before, you can start reading the Parsha. That's called Imat Tzibur, because the Tzibur is reading it. But when do you have to conclude? Tosfos brings a midrash that says Rabbeinu HaKadosh gave his sons three directions. One of them was Lo tochlu lechem b'Shabbos. You should not eat the meal on Shabbos until you finish the parsha. So ideally, you should finish before you eat. However, he says Mikra Adin b'diavad, after you eat. That's also okay. Mitzvah Mufchar, the ideal is before you eat. Daf Tes, the Gemara talks about this manim of Kriya Shema, Shachris, and Arvis. When can you begin? When can you end? Regarding Kriya Shema Shel Arvis, until when can you go? You begin. We saw in the beginning of the parak with most posts can say Tzeisik Chavim. Until when do you have to read Kriya Shema? The Mishnah brought Machlokas. The Gemara says we paskin like Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim. The Meikra Din Midaraisa, it is the whole night. But the Rabbanan said you shouldn't read it. You shouldn't read it after Chatzos. You should read it by Chatzos. The Mishnah Berurah brings the poskim say L'chatchila you should read it right away at Tzeisik Chavim, because reason Machtim L'mitzvos, we always say that you're supposed to do a mitzvah as soon as possible. But Mikra Din, you can read it until Chatzos, and you're not an Avarian, you just lost the idea of being reason. But it's still the mitzvah Mikra Din. Once you pass Chatzos, you're still a Yotzei, because that is the Zman B'Daraisa. But at that point, you are called an Avarian. You're called someone who was over El Divrei Chachamim, someone who violated the Chachamim's rule. But you can read it. You can read it the rest of the night. B'diavad, if someone reads Kriya Shema after Elos HaShachar, after daybreak, but before Neitz HaChama, before sunrise, generally he's not Yotzi B'diavad. That's a Midrabanan. Midaraisa, the Midaraisa is considered Zman Shchiva. Some people still sleep later until Nates, but the Rabbanan said if you waited that long, they already said if you waited after Chatzos, you're over the Rechamim. If you waited after Alos, then they said they were Mavatal Mitzvah, and if you don't have an excuse, then you're not Yotzi at all if you waited till then. However, if you're an Ones, if you're a Shikar or a Chola, the Gemara has a story of people who got drunk and were late. So if you're an Ones, then you can read it until Neitz HaChama, because Midaraisa, that's the din. It's still considered as Man Shchiva. People are still sleeping. Some people still sleep until Nates. Ika Inshni, Deganu Bahu Shaita. But you don't say Ashkivenu, the Gemara says. At that point, once it's past Elos, you can no longer say Ashkivenu, because it's not Man Shchiva. Even though we just said that it is Man Shchiva, Rashi and Achronim explain that it's Man Shchiva in the sense that people are still sleeping. People have gone to sleep earlier. Some of them sleep late. They sleep in. They sleep until Nates. But you don't go to sleep at that time. You don't go to sleep after Elos. So Ashkivenu means we're going to sleep. That you cannot say any time after Alos, but if you have an onus, you can say Kriya Shema Meikra Din until Alos. After that, it's not man Kriya Shema at all. You can still read Kikari B'Torah, but you don't get the mitzvah at all after Alos HaShachar. The other brachos, aside from Ashkevenu, you can make until nights in the case where you're an onus. What about Kriyash Mashal Shachris? Kriyash Mashal Shachris, so Vasikin we're going to discuss in a later sugya, but the basic zmanim of Kriyash Mashal Shachris, Chatchila, it should not be said before Neitzachama. If you're an ones, again, if you have no choice, you have to travel, it's hard to say it later, then you can say it earlier, even with the brachos from Alos to Shachar. Here, even b'diavad, if you said it from Alos, Chazal did not, we're not oker the mitzvah, you're still yotzi b'diavad from Alos even without nates, even from Alos even without an onus, but l'chatchila, without an onus, you should not read until nates. Now, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that if a person applied the first din, he had an onus, he got drunk, he was sick, and couldn't say Kriyash Mashal Arvis until after Alos, before nates, and he's going to be traveling during the day, and he wants to say Kriyash Ma Shel Shachris at that same time too. He wants to say Kriyash Ma twice and be Yotze once for the previous night because he was an onus, and once for the coming day because he's an onus for that too. That the Shulchan Aruch says you can't do. That's Tarta Disaster. That's mutually contradictory. Mishabur says Yesh Cholkim. Some Achronim say it's not a problem. You can do both Kriyash Mas at that time. It's Zman Shchiva and Zman Gima apparently, so you can do both. But the Shulchan Aruch paskins you cannot do both. Zman Kriyash Ma L'Chatchila is from Misha Yaker. That ideally you read it that ideally nates, but with the evidence we said onus you can go back before nates from Alos, but this man is Misha Yaker. You can recognize your friend who you know somewhat, not your intimate friend, but from 4 amos away, 4 cubits, or Tchelos Lavan, between the color Tchelos and Lavan. And the end of Zman Kriyash Ma is the 3 hours, quarter of the day. That's the Sof Zman Kriyash Ma, Magen Avraham and the Gon, whether the 3 hours are counted from Alos or nates. That's why we have 2 different Zmanim. But l'chatchila, the Mishnah Berurah brings from the Shnos Eliyahu, you really can't wait till Sos Man Kriyash Ma. L'chatchila, a person really should say Kriyash Ma earlier, but the Ikra Din you have until a quarter of the day, until 3 hours into the day. Mitzvah Muvchar, the ideal way to read Kriyash Ma is Vasikin. Scharo Harbe Ma'od, someone gets great reward if he does that. The Halachos says that someone who is Zahir, someone who is particular, meticulous about doing Kriyash Ma Vasikin, can do that even at the cost of a minyan. If he doesn't have a minyan, it's better to do Vasikin than to have a minyan if a minyan is not available at Vasikin. The Achronim debate, contemporary Achronim debate, Mishnah Berurah's language is Hazihirin Likros, those who are regularly accustomed to do that, then can do it even at the expense of a minyan. Does that mean someone who doesn't usually do it, but today he's moved by a spirit of zealousness and wants to do it? Should he also do that at the expense of a minyan? Achronim disagree. Some say, Bir Halacha said Zahirin, it just means that's the common case, but in Achanami, anyone who's doing it for reasons of meticulousness and mitzvahs can do it even without a minyan. Others say no, it's only someone who routinely does it with a minyan. The Gemara brings on Daf Yud a halacha that a person should not daven on a makom gavoa, on an elevated place. He should only daven makom namuch, as it says, Yinamakim krasicha Hashem. The Gemara brings a brisa, you shouldn't stand on a chair or a stool or different types of elevated locations. Rather, only a makom namuch, a low place, because ein gavos l'fnei makom, there's no elevation, there's no haughtiness and elevating yourself in the presence of Hashem. Mamakim krasicha Hashem, tfilah la'ani ki yatov. The Ramah says even if it's not 3 tefachim high, even a small step is a problem. Some Achronim Mamekel if it's not 3 tefachim high. Those who are machmer do so even if it's not technically gavos l'fnei makom. They have another concern they worry about. It's precarious. You're worried about falling off. It's going to be hard to have kavanas. That's the second reason. Besides, Makim krasicha Hashem, there's a new concern. Shema Yipol, you won't have kavanah. The Gemara says you shouldn't stand on stools or elevated places, but you should stand on makom namuch. It's not clear if that means namuch as opposed to gavah, but the floor is fine. The Mishnah Berurah does bring the Magen Avraham, who says that Achshav, the time of the Magen Avraham, the minhag was that the tzibur, the shliach tzibur, would actually descend into a depression, into a little well where the amud was. That was all mimamakim. Mimamakim, he would daven in specifically a low place. That's why he says it's called Yared L'fnei HaTeva. We call a Shliach Tzibur one who descends because he would go down into a well. Some shuls today still do this. I think, in my experience, the general minhag is most shuls are not particular about this. This is the Mishnah Berurah b'shem the Magen Avraham. The Gemara says you have to put your feet together during Shmoneh Esrei, v'ragleim regel yishara. That is, of course, what we do. The Gemara says Lo sochlu al adam. The pasuk says Lo sochlu al adam. A difficult pasuk to translate. The Gemara brings an interpretation, a drasha. Lo sochlu, you shall not eat before you pray al dimchem, before you pray for your own blood, for your own safety, your own needs from Hashem. Anyone who first eats before davening is a terrible thing. Hashem says, you have cast me aside. You're nisgaya. After you've filled your stomach, now you're proud and full of yourself. literally and figuratively, now you're being makabel malchus shamayim, it's considered gaiva, it's considered disrespectful to Hashem to eat before davening. Shulchan Aruch and most poskim say water is okay. There are some who disagree. The Pri Chadash says even water is not allowed. The Chidas says machmer tavo ala bracha, but many poskim, certainly Ashkenazic poskim, assume water is okay. Coffee and tea is a famous machlokes, particularly with sugar. Many poskim will make it with coffee and tea by itself. It's like water, but coffee and tea with sugar. Some say ein lecha gava gedola mizu, to have sugar. Others say it's less of a problem. The poskim have a great debate about coffee and tea. There are two other exceptions involved, two other heterim in the Shulchan Aruch to eat before davening. One of them is ochel umashkim l'refuah. A person is eating and drinking for medicinal purposes. That is permitted. Also, hatzamei v'harayv, someone who is exceptionally thirsty or exceptionally hungry, they're considered cholim, they're considered sick, and if they can't be mechavein, if the hunger pangs, if the thirst has reached that level where they can no longer be mechavein properly, then they can eat just like a sick person can. So Zman Kriya Shema, we said earlier that the Zman Kriya Shema itself is only till 3 hours, a quarter of the day, but you can still read Kriya Shema all day, Kikari B'Tara, but even with the Brachos you can read Kriya Shema until the end of 4 hours, a third into the day, even though that's not Zman Kriya Shema. But the brachos, the poskim explain, are not really part of Kriya Shema. Chazal say that with Kriya Shema, but the brachos are more like tefillah. They're really just parts of davening. So tefillah can be said until the 4th hour. So we can read Kriya Shema with the brachos until the 4th hour. After the 4th hour, you can say Kriya Shema the whole day. It's nothing wrong. It's harmless. But the brachos can no longer be said after the 4th hour into the day. Daf Yud Aleph, the Gemara says that when someone marries a basula, a woman who's never been married, a virgin, then he is patur from Kriya Shema. The Gemara discusses why exactly. Osik b'mitzvah, the Gemara talks about. The Gemara says tirda, the person is torrid. Ordinary tirda, a person is distracted or worried about economic things, his ship is sinking. That's not a ptur. But if someone is torrid b'mitzvah, he's worried about the forthcoming wedding night, the upcoming wedding night, that's tirda b'mitzvah, and he is patur. We don't conduct ourselves this way today. A chassan still says Kriya Shema, because the poskim explained that Bizman Rishonim, where they had great kavana, that's when they had this exemption. Today, when we don't have that much going on to begin with, so the chassan is not that much worse than anyone else. So even someone who marries a basula still says is not patur from Kriya Shema. The Gemara says, the Shulchan Aruch says, you can read Kriya Shema, mahalech, omeid, shochev, rochev l'gab behema, yoshev, walking, standing, reclining, riding an animal, sitting down. All those postures are okay. Shochev, reclining, is actually a machlokas. Some say that really shochev is not appropriate because it's not respectful. The heter of shochev is only if a person is already lying down and it would be a tircha to get up. Mikra din, you can do that, but it's not ideal. Others say that lying on your side is okay, and there's no problem whatsoever. A person can even lechatchila lie down on his side. We mentioned earlier the Meiri, who criticizes people who say Kriya Shema in bed, lying down with their head uncovered, but la halacha, it isn't machlok fishanim, but some say that lying down is fine, lechatchila, as long as it's al tzido on your side. The Gemara says, the Shulchan Aruch says, if someone is machmer to stand up for Kriya Shema, like Beis Shammai, that Beis Shammai says, uvkumecha means when you literally stand up, that someone who does that is an avarian. It's not necessary, it's wrong. Why exactly are you an avarian? What's wrong with chumras? What's wrong with doing like Beis Shammai? So one reason is that we're afraid that if you stand up and people will understand that you're doing like Beis Shammai, people will think that halacha is like Beis Shammai, and that, besides being wrong, is dangerous, because someone might be in a situation where he can't stand up, and he'll just say, okay, I guess I can't say Kriya Shema today, and he'll skip Kriya Shema, so you can lead to someone, your action will lead to someone being mevatel the mitzvah of Kriya Shema unnecessarily. Others say no, even if it won't lead to any problem like that, the mere fact that you're adopting a chumrah which is not correct is itself wrong. You're rejecting the opinion of Beis Hillel, which is la halacha, the correct opinion, that it just means the time people get up. We do a lot of chumras, so there are all kinds of chumras that poskim say you can do, even though we don't paskin like that. So the Shulchan Aruch Harav, they bring from the Shulchan Aruch Harav that he explains other chumras, even if the halacha doesn't require them, halacha agrees that they're good, it's just halacha doesn't go that far, you don't have to do that. But it's a good thing, so doing a good thing is fine, as a chumrah. But here, Beis Hillel says, that's not what the pasuk means, it's just wrong. There's no advantage going to Beis Hillel. So doing something which Beis Hillel says is zero, is not worth anything, that's an aveira to deliberately do that, even if Beis Shammai holds it is a good thing, since Beis Shammai is not la halacha. There's machlok sakranim about Yom Kippur. People would stand on Yom Kippur. Marshal says that's okay because that's not yuhara, that doesn't show that you're doing chumras. we do it for a specific reason because we're like malachim. Malachim are called omzim, those who stand. So doing it on Yom Kippur for a specific reason, that's okay. But some say no. Some say the Chazal said avariyim. The halacha is you're an avari, you're not allowed to stand. Even on Yom Kippur, you shouldn't get up and stand for Kriya Shema. The Gemara brings machlokes about the second bracha of Kriya Shema. The first one is Yotzerar. The second one is Ava Rabba or Avas Olam. The Gemara brings two different opinions, whether you say Avas Olam or Ava Rabba. The Mechaber Paskins Avas Olam, what we call the Sfard today. It's Svardim say Avas Olam. Some say Ava Rabba, Ashkenazim. The Rama says that's the Minhag in Ashkenaz, it's Ava Rabba. Tosfos says because there are two opinions, that's what we say both. Because at night everyone agrees that you say Avas Olam. So Tosfos says our Minhag of Ashkenaz to say Ava Rabba in the morning. And Avas Olam at night is a kind of compromise to get both Nischos in. B'diavad, it's not a problem. B'diavad, you yotzei yidei chavaso with Avas Olam in the morning, according to everyone. And it's all a question of l'chatchila, what's the right way to say it. Mar talks about Brachos Torah. Mar brings different opinions. What categories of Torah require brachas? Lahalacha, we paskin bein lemikra for Torah Shabbat Tanakh, bein lemishnah for Mishnayos, bein legemara for Talmud, for halacha, bein lemidrash for midrash. All these things require a Brachos Torah. The Gemara brings different opinions about what the text of Brachos Torah is. What bracha do you make? The conclusion is Hilkach Lemrinu L'Kulu. We say all the brachos, and that's what we do. We say 2 or 3 brachos. We say Asher Kedushan Mitzvos V'Tzvanu Al Divrei Torah or Lasek B'Divrei Torah, which is what we say, and then B'Haravna, and then Asher Bachar Banu, which is either 2 or 3 brachos. And that indeed, there are 2 debates in the poskim about there are 2 practical applications, practical implications of the question of whether they are really 2 brachos or 3 brachos. One question is whether you say a vav of B'Haravna. If B'Haravna is a continuation, you would say a vav. If B'Haravna is a separate bracha, you would say no vav. Post can bring different minhagim about what to do. Our minhag is to say V'Haravna. Mishnah Berurah says with a vav. Mishnah Berurah prefers that minhag. He says that's the better minhag because V'Haravna, he says it can be yotzei according to all opinions. If it's 2 brachas, great, you said a vav. If it's 1 bracha, it's great, you said a vav. Even if it's 2 brachas, he says saying a vav is not the end of the world. But if it's really 1 bracha and you don't say vav, then you're making a hefsek. So he says that's more of a problem. So he recommends saying V'Haravna with a vav. Poskim also have a related debate whether you should say Amen after Lasok B'Divrei Zara. Most Acharonim say you should not answer Amen. Mishnah Berurah recommends to avoid this question. The best thing to do is that the Mavarech should, if someone says Brachos Torah, he should recite the bracha of Lasok B'Divrei Zara. He should recite it quietly to avoid getting to this question of saying Amen or not. Daf Yud Beis, the Gemara says the order of the brachos is not ma'akev. Say the brachos out of order, you're still yotzei b'diavad. The Gemara talks about the bowing down during the bracha of Avos, the first bracha, and Modim. It says when you say the word Baruch, you bend at your knees. But when you say the Shem, then you arise, you revert to an erect posture. The Gemara says when you say Baruch, the post can explain you bend your knees. When you say Ata, then you bend more deeply until Yispaku Akolyos, your spine protrudes. When you say the word Modim, that's different. When you say Modim, you don't do the double 2-stage bowing. You just Bavas Achas in one shot. You go completely Rosho V'Gufo. Your head and body bends over Ka'agmon, like a serpent, and you remain bowed down until the Shem you rise. There's an interesting machlokas in the Rishonim and Achronim about what does it mean when it says that you should rise for the Shem, you should revert to an erect posture for the Shem. Some say it means before the Shem, so when you begin Hashem's name, you're already erect. Some say it means that you should return to an erect posture while you're saying the Shem. Some have a compromise. They say that in the first bracha in Avos, you should get back up while you're saying the Shem. When it comes to Modim, you should do it before the Shem. There are different opinions. The Gemara talks about the changes and additions that we make in the Aseres Meitshuva, saying Hamelach HaKadosh instead of Hakel HaKadosh, and Hamelach HaMishpat instead of Melech Oiv Tzedakah Mishpat. There is a machlokes Rishonim whether what the Gemara just says this is the way to do it, and that's how we paskin, but there's machlokes whether that means even b'diavad you're not yotzei and you have to go back. So Tosfos says you have to go back, and he even brings opinions that Zachreinu and Michamocha, and the other 2 things we say, Zachreinu, Michamocha, Ksov L'chaim, B'Sefer Chaim, the other 4 things that we say, you also go back, because you're Mishanim and Pesh Tavach HaChamim. Anyone who changes the Nusach of Tefillah is not yotzei, and he has to go back. Other Rishonim say that anything that's not in anything that it doesn't say explicitly that you have to go back for, you don't go back. That's a machlokas. So we have two opinions in the Rishonim. Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah both paskin that for Hamelach HaKadosh and for Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, you do have to go back. However, the Ramah brings a sort of compromise view that even though in principle Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat is Ma'akev, that only means if you didn't say Melech at all, if you said there were some communities that are recited throughout the year, Hakel Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, didn't say the word Melech at all, if you said that, then you're not Yotzi during a Seres Yemei Tshuva. But if you said Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, then b'diavad you Yotzei even when you're supposed to say Melech HaMishpat. That's how the Ramah paskins, that's the minhag, at least for Ashkenaz. And the Mishnah Berurah brings from the Achronim that if you did remember Tachnei Dibur, you should go back and say Melech Ohev Tzedakah, you should say Melech HaMishpat, even though you said Melech Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat. However, b'diavad, we go with the Ramah, that as long as the person said the word Melech and didn't say Hakel Ohev Tzedakah Mishpat, then b'diavad he does not have to go back. The Gemara on Daf Yud Gimel, in the second parak, the first Mishnah, the second parak, the Mishnah says, if a person is reading the Torah and he gets to Kriya Shema, is he Yotze or not, depends in Kivein Libo Yatza, only if you have Kavana. The Gemara brings the famous question of whether mitzvah strichas Kavana. If you want to fulfill a mitzvah, do you need Kavana to be Yotze the mitzvah or not? The Gemara says a simple reading of the Mishnah would indicate that you do, because that's why in Kivein Libo Yatza, if not the mitzvah strichas Kavana. The Gemara says, no, it's not compelling. We can say that if you weren't, that what it says in Kiven Yatza, if not, you're not Yotze, doesn't mean Kavanah L'Shem Mitzvah, it just means Kiven Lekros, it just means you basically have the Kavanah that you're reading the Torah, as opposed to Kari L'Hagia, Kari to correct, but you don't really need Kavanah L'Shem Mitzvah. There's a major machlokes, Rishonim and Achronim, whether L'Halacha L'Maisa we paskin Mitzvah Strichas Kavanah or not. If you do need Kavanah, then many poskim say that this would be Daraisa, that Midaraisa there's a requirement of Kavanah. The Shiburu says the Primogadim is not sure, but the Biur Halacha says the Ikar is that if you need Kavana, according to those opinions, you need Kavana Midaraisa. There is an opinion the Mishnah Berurah brings that you only need mitzvahs, that Lahalacha we have a compromise, you only need Kavana Likuva, you only need Kavana for a mitzvah daraisa, but not for mitzvah darabanan. But the Mishnah Berurah says, other Akharim say no, that if you hold mitzvah strichas Kavana, it applies for mitzvahs daraisa as well as mitzvahs darabanan. You always need Kavana, according to the opinion, mitzvah strichas Kavana. Mishnah Berurah then brings a major leniency of the Chai Adam. The Chai Adam says that this requirement of Kavana, and the fact that if you don't have Kavana, you're not Yotze, is only if, based on the context, based on what you're doing and the context in which you're doing it, it's plausible, it's realistic to say that you didn't intend to do it for the mitzvah. Then, if you hold strichas Kavana, you didn't have Kavana, you're not Yotze. A person blows the shofar, maybe he's still kaya. That if a person does certain things which are like Kriya Shema, which could just be for Kriya, for reading Torah, then he's not Yotze if it's not clear that if he didn't intend explicitly for the mitzvah. However, he says things where the context is clear that you're doing it l'shem mitzvah, Kriya Shema in the context of davening, Brachos Kriya Shema and prayer and talis and tefillin and everything, it's clear that it's b'seder tefillah, it's for the mitzvah. Someone who eats matzah, someone who blows shofar and takes lulav, it's clear he's doing it for the mitzvah. These are clearly religious observances. There's no other reasonable construction we could put on what he's doing. Then even without explicit kavana, he's still Yotze. And the Mishnah Berurah explains that the svara is because the Indian is muchak. Even if you don't have explicit kavana, the entire context of your conduct makes it clear that you're doing it l'shem mitzvah. However, the Mishnah Berurah says even the Chayadim agrees b'stama lo yatza, that in the Talmud and Halach we have the concept of stam. You had not kavana for Torah, not kavana for Kriya Shema, not kavana for anything. That everyone agrees is not good if you hold strichas kavana. The chiddush of the Chayadim is that if there was no explicit kavana but kavana based on the context, that is sufficient to be Yotze the Shita of mitzvah strichas kavana. This is all b'diavad. Strichas kavana l'chatchila. A person certainly should have kavana to be Yotze the mitzvah. The Mishnah Berurah says this is the opinion of all the Achronim. The Gemara says that Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That's what you need kavana for. That's the Shita of Rameir. That's l'halacha. The Mishnah Berurah explains that means that we're talking about kavana more than just kavana for the mitzvah. Kavana for the mitzvah, if you hold strichas kavana, is an entire Kriya Shema. This means a special kavana of what you're saying, that you'd be makabel al malchus shamayim. That's the ikar kavana al malchus shamayim. Kabbalah malchus shamayim. That's what you need in the first pasuk. Besides the question of kavana for the mitzvah, and some say the Mishnah Berurah says that even kavana for the mitzvah is only the first pasuk. The Gemara talks about standing. Standing, the Achronim explain, it means that even though we don't stand l'chatchila, but it means if you're sitting, but if you're traveling, it's hard to have kavana, so you should stop and stand, or sit, but you should stop and stand. So the Rishonim disagree, lahalacha, how long do you have to stand? When can you start walking again? The Rif and the Rambam and Tosfos say pasuk Rishon, even though the Gemara says till alav avecha, since we paskin the ikr kavana, as we just said, is only pasuk rishon, so the requirement to stop and stand is only pasuk rishon. The Bach follows the sheet of the Bahag and the Ravid and other poskim, the Bahag and the Ravid, that you should stand until Alav Avecha. Baruch Shem is considered the first pasuk, and you should stand during the first pasuk. You're allowed to say Kriya Shema whether you're standing or sitting. And again, even though you were walking and you stand, that's not, you're even allowed to sit down. That even though it's Kriya Shema at night, we said you're not allowed to sit down at night because you're doing like Beishamai. But that's only if you're standing and you dafka sit down. But if you're walking, you have to stop anyway and you sit down. That's okay. Mishabura brings that if you're sitting in a wagon or a ship, you don't have to stop because the problem is kavanah. The problem is when you're walking, you can't be mechavan. If you're sitting on a train, sitting in a ship, there's no impediment to kavanah, so that's okay.